Hey everybody, welcome to another exciting edition of IncrediChat by Incredicon up here, the family-friendly pop culture and comic fest in the Hudson Valley. Tonight we've got a great guest, but first I want you to just make sure if you're watching us tonight on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, follow and like us, share us out. Looks like we got a bunch of viewers already, and then as you see scrolling down there's some other pages that we'll go to. And without further ado, you saw the image up there, but let's welcome in our guest star tonight, a very talented performer, puppeteer. He's done it all: Broadway, television, movies. Ladies and gentlemen, Rick Lyon. Welcome, Rick.
Hi everybody. Hi, Mike.
Hello. No, it is a great pleasure to have you on here with us tonight. And I mean, truly, you have done so much. I mean, television, movies, Broadway, you name it, and you're still working. And
well, that's the thing about being a puppeteer. If you're going to commit to the art form, that means you're going to do a variety of different things and lots of different media. I mean, and that's also, as an artist, you have to. You have to do that. You can't say, well, I'm just going to do Broadway, or gee, I'm just going to do movies. You do whatever opportunity comes your way. That's how you have to survive as an artist. So I've been very blessed. I've been very lucky to, be involved in all those things that I have interest in. But yeah, I mean, that's part of the artist deal. You just have to be flexible. You have to be a jack of all trades.
Yeah. So now let me ask you, because one of our focus is young people and creative arts and education. Young Rick Lyon, what was your inspiration? How did you decide this is the route I'm going to be a puppeteer?
How long is the show? About 8 hours, right? So
it could be.
No, it's actually the story of how I got into puppetry is actually pretty simple. I've always been interested in puppetry. There is actually not really a time in my life that I can remember not being attracted to it for some reason. And that's always a hard question to answer. Why do you like puppetry? Well, that's sort of like asking somebody, well, what's your favorite kind of music? Why is it your favorite kind of music? Usually you don't have a pat answer for that. It's not that easy. Well, whatever. I just like the kind of music that I like because I like it. It's hard to describe why you like something, but for some reason, puppetry always appealed to me. And when I can tell you that I've always been interested in it. I've always been, drawn to that form. There were a couple of real sort of, turning of events sort of moments for me. When I was a little kid, they still had World's Fairs. There were World Expositions. And the 1964 World's Fair was in New York. It was in Queens, Astoria. And my mother's family is originally from Long Island, so we always used to visit them every summer. And that summer of '64, we went to the World's Fair as we were going back and forth to Long Island. And in the UK pavilion, or UK section, the British section, there was a guy doing Punch and Judy shows. So, of course, I wanted to go see the live puppet show. And frankly, I had never seen a live one. I'd always seen puppets on TV. The puppets that I saw on TV back in 1964, they were the puppets. You had Bert Tillstrom on TV, and you had the puppets on Captain Kangaroo, Cosmo Allegretti. So this was a live puppet show, and I wanted to go see it. So we went to see the show. And if for those of you who don't know Punch and Judy is this style of hand puppet. They're like the puppets that Mr. Rogers had on his show. They're hand puppets with sculpted heads, and these are your fingers go in the arms like that. So that's what a Punch and Judy puppet's like. And the Punch and Judy puppets are spun off from Commedia dell'arte, which is an improvised form of street theater from Italy. It's crazy. It's violent. In Punch and Judy, Punch beats up everybody. He beats his wife. He throws his baby out the window. And then eventually he gets his comeuppance at the end. But so I watched this show. It was live. It was in person. It was noisy. It had sound effects and crazy, irreverent humor in it. And afterwards, it was fantastic. Afterwards, I kind of, lingered in the theater. I didn't want to go because I just wanted to sort of like look backstage or get as much information about what I had just seen as humanly possible. And for some reason, he was a very nice guy. The puppeteer saw that I was lingering and said, "Hey, do you want to see inside the stage?" And of course I said yes. And he took the back off his booth. Oh, something you should know about Punch and Judy shows, they are done in a booth. So instead of like a theatrical stage, it's a standing booth, and the puppeteer stands and with a curtain that he can see through between him and the puppets. So he's looking through this scrim so he can see the puppets, but he's standing. So the booth is only like 3 feet wide. And, however tall it has to be for the puppeteer, like 7 feet or whatever it is. So anyway, and it's covered with a fabric curtain. Well, he took the curtain off the back of his stage, and I looked inside, and inside there's a rack of like teacup hooks, little brass teacup hooks, and all the puppets are hanging upside down so he can thrust his hand into them and get into them quickly on these racks. And it was at that moment that I appreciated, or sort of it dawned on me, that everything in the show was done by this one guy. He was the only puppeteer. He performed every character, every voice. He made all the sound effects. He changed the scenery. And as it turned out, he made all the props and all the puppets, and he did everything. And it was at that moment that I went, wow, that guy, that one guy did all that stuff and entertained all those people. That's power. That's cool. I want to be able to do that. So that was a real bellwether kind of moment for me. And then the first time that I saw the Muppets on TV, back in the day, there used to be lots of variety shows on TV. They were sort of like America's Got Talent, but there was not a competition. There was Ed Sullivan, and there was Hollywood Palace, and there were all sorts of variety show specials, Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, whatever, all kinds. And Jim Henson would appear on these variety shows. And I think it was probably the Ed Sullivan Show, because that's the show he was on most often. But when I saw the Muppets, those were the kinds of puppets that I'd never seen before. They were weird, and they were abstract, and they were made out of soft materials, and their faces were really expressive. And yeah, they were bizarre. They blew each other up and ate each other and all this sort of stuff. And that, again, that was a real turning point for me. I was like, okay, I love puppets, but that kind of puppetry, that's amazing. I want to do that. And so from sort of that first time that I ever saw him, I tried to do that kind of puppet. And I mean, seriously, when I saw that puppet show at the World's Fair, I was like 6 years old. I was very young. So I've been interested in puppetry like forever. And it was always a hobby. One of the things that I discovered when I was in like grade school, and I'm still doing this hobby. I'm still doing puppets. Like I'm in 3rd grade, 4th grade. I'm still doing puppets as a hobby. And by this time, I'm starting to make my own, not just store-bought things, but I'm starting to make my own as best I can out of whatever I can find around the house. I discovered that you could do creative projects in school and get good grades for them. And they seemed easier because they were things I was excited to do, like doing a puppet show about George Washington crossing the Delaware was more fun to do, and it was an easy A. Of course, it wasn't easy at all. I worked probably 10 times harder than any kid who wrote a written report, but it engaged my enthusiasm, so it seemed easy. So, I started doing puppet shows in school, which sort of is, public. I started doing shows at church, at my family's church, and all through junior high school. And in junior high school, I did a bunch of public performances that were related to my German class. So I was performing puppet shows in German at
wow.
language fairs and stuff like that. And through high school, I really got the theater bug, and I was like in all the shows in high school and stuff like that. And I also play music. I'm a trained musician, and I studied music. And when it came to going to college, I was like, I really want to study theater, but my folks were like, dude, you'll never work. You need to, if you're a musician, you can at least, teach. You end up not playing in orchestras and stuff, whatever. You can go teach. So, sort of to placate them, I was like, okay, I'll study music. So I went to Penn State for music because there was a really good saxophone. I play saxophone. There was a really good saxophone teacher there at the time. And I also sort of went under false pretenses because they said, sure, yeah, you can be a double major. You can double in, or you can have a minor in theater, which was a total lie. Because if you're a performance major, you don't have time for anything else. You're locked in a practice room 24/7. You got to do recitals. You got to play in all the ensembles. So I was a music major for a while, and I found out that I love music, but I just can't do it 24/7. I can do theater 24/7. So I switched to theater major. And it was while I was a theater major studying acting, with a capital A, that I realized that this hobby that I'd always had, this thing that I always did, I always wrote my own scripts and made my puppets and made my scenery and did the performing and stuff. It was not until I was in college that I realized, dude, this hobby, this thing that you've been doing forever, that could be a career choice. You're your own sort of little repertory theater. You do everything. You're the designer, you're the props builder, you're the costumer, you're the actor, you're the performer, you're everything. And so puppetry is really this complete, for the average puppeteer, is this complete theatrical immersion. And then it was sort of like, well, that's the career path, and that's what I pursued.
Yeah. So it's kind of like,
there's the short story with a lot of words.
Well, so what it sounds like is you kind of came full circle. You saw this Puppeteer at the World's Fair when you were 6, and then when you were in college, you realized, hey, I can exactly do what I saw him doing, that one man show, that one, with doing it all.
Right. It really it took until, it took almost 20 years for me to figure out that it can be something more than a hobby. And that what I'd been doing all this time and devoting so much time to was a completely valid form of theater and a completely not sensible. Oh, God knows that is not a word to apply to puppetry. It's not sensible at all. But a perfectly legitimate career choice. It's like, and I forget which interview it is or which program it is. He either says it in Jim, the Muppets on Puppets, the thing that Jim taped a million years ago for public television, or it was some interview. Jim said, I don't think anyone would ever think of choosing puppetry as a career. And that's from the world's most famous puppeteer, so it is not your first inclination. It probably, on the list of career choices, is not going to be at the top of your list, but I'm here to tell you, don't write it off. It could be. If it's something that you're interested in and that you're dedicated to and you're devoted to and that you love and that you can devote your passion to, do it.
And certainly here in 2021 and our pandemic world, as we see even what we're doing now, there are so many people, we have Instagram, we have YouTube, we have all TikTok, all these things. So there's a whole generation of people who grew up watching your work and Jim's work who are like, I can do this out of my own house now. And that's something like you and Jim didn't have,
Oh, yeah.
The world is the audience now.
Oh, yeah. That's the amazing thing right now about being an artist. Back in the day, there were lots of artists and very few delivery systems for your product. There were very few ways of distributing what you did. Nowadays, there are zillions of ways to distribute what you do. Literally anybody with a smartphone can make a movie. I mean, you can make a feature film on a phone. You know, the access to the ability to distribute content is unbelievable. And of course, this is one of Hollywood's problems right now, is that mainstream television and films are having a real hard time catching up to that technology. Hollywood is scrambling. They sort of don't know how to handle all the competition from all those independent distributions. You know, it's interesting. That's one of the reasons that what you'll see from like major studios like Disney is big make or break things. Everything will be a huge Marvel super movie. It'll be this amazing thing that they've spent $300 million on. They won't do small projects anymore because small projects have a much greater risk of failure because there's too much competition. You know, the average person still cannot compete with a big Marvel's Avengers movie that has that kind of studio clout behind it. But I mean, look at the advent of YouTube channels and Instagram TV, and I mean TikTok, you know, has taken over the world. Somebody with just a phone and no resources can get millions of views. Now, monetizing that is a whole nother story, but you can if you put your content out there and it's attractive to people, you can get eyeballs.
Yeah, and I mean,
and nowadays, I mean, when I was growing up in this field, you couldn't afford a TV camera. You couldn't afford a video monitor and computers and all the stuff that nowadays digital technology has become so affordable. Yeah, it's still expensive, but by comparison, it's nothing anymore. Yeah. I mean, you can use your phone. You don't even need a laptop. You can use your phone to edit videos. I mean, I see the stuff that my daughter does with video editing apps, and they're as powerful as some of the, Finale and some of the Adobe high-end, editing stuff nowadays. So you can put it out there. If you can imagine it, there are a lot of tools out there that people can use that weren't available to people like me. I mean, I was thinking about this today before this interview. I was thinking like, whoa, the tools that people have to make stuff are just so amazing. There are apps, there are literally apps that you can buy to create all the explosions for your action movie nowadays. All you have to do is push a button and boom, everything blows up. And they're not bad. They're good explosions. They're like credible sort of cinema quality stuff. So yeah, the tools that we have at our disposal now are just amazing.
It's gonna only grow as time goes on. It's crazy. Sure. I just want to take a moment and recognize and we've got a bunch of comments, and we're gonna get to all the questions. Marcelo, Sarah Jean, Steve Jordan, Brian Carson, JoJo Puppet Studio, Anthony Thompson, Eddie from Grand Slam Comedy. A whole bunch of people are popping in here right now on the Facebook and the YouTube pages. And here we are using that technology, right?
Yeah. But I'm sorry, I'm not looking at comments. So if I miss your questions or whatever, I'm going to let Mike, who's much more experienced with this sort of stuff, handle that. I'm very bad with that split focus, looking over at comments and asking questions, looking at questions and stuff. But please feel free, post your comments, what's more important than comments is post questions. If there's something you want to know, ask, because I'll be happy to answer.
And that interview that somebody said Henson's Place is what you were thinking of, where Jim said that.
Oh, is that what it is? I knew it was some kind of documentary interview, something or other. Yeah. Okay.
And just for everybody that's watching too, in the Instagram and Facebook page, Rick Lyon Puppets. That's where you can find current stuff, and then you can also check out, if you want to see some of Rick's older work, lionpuppets.com, which is a really cool website. There's a lot of great pictures on there, and I pulled a couple of them tonight. So you went to college, and I guess what was your first gig out of college? I mean, I'm gonna pull up this picture here, but I don't know if this was if you were with these guys right off the bat, but here you are with Jim.
Oh, that's after I started working with them. That's in the summer of 1987. That's at the Charleville-Mézières Institute for Puppetry in Charleville-Mézières, France. So I told you I was a theater major in college, and because I'm a character guy, I'm a tall, thin, dorky character guy, and almost everybody in college is Romeo and Juliet, because you're all the same age. Almost everybody's an ingenue, except me. I was always like this. I was always, a character guy. I was in like every show. People were seeing me on stage all the time. And one of my theater professors knew that I did puppetry. I'm still not exactly sure how she found that out. I don't know. But she recommended that I start doing a large outdoor arts festival that they have at Penn State, called the Central Pennsylvania Festival of the Arts. And that was the first time I ever did performances for a huge outdoor live audience. I mean, there were, this is like you're on a hillside and thousands of people are watching you. And so that got me going with public performances while I was in college. And then that same theater professor was responsible for a children's theater ensemble that toured the schools, school districts, the elementary schools in central Pennsylvania. And she lost funding for that program. And she recommended that I take their place. So I found myself touring all the schools in central Pennsylvania. So I was gathering an audience on stage, and I was gathering audiences as a puppeteer. And the funny thing happened. I started, here's me in theater, and here's me in puppetry. I started doing more and more puppetry and less theater, until eventually I was like paying all my bills doing puppet shows. And so after I finished college, I stayed in the Penn State area, and because I already had a clientele. I had an audience that I had sort of baked in over the years, just because I was visible. People got to know me. And it was while I was doing those shows after college that I went, I'm kind of missing something here. I started getting fraud syndrome. And I was like, here I am. I'm doing shows and I'm getting paid to be a puppeteer. And I really don't have any puppetry training. Everything I've done is self-taught. I've taught myself how to make puppets. I've written my own material. I've never even really met another person who considers themselves a professional puppeteer. And I was feeling sort of isolated and insulated. And I thought I should get better, more exposure. I should learn something more about what I'm doing. And that self-same theater professor who got me sort of started on a career path towards puppetry had across her desk a pamphlet from the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center and their brand spanking new first time puppetry study program, the Institute for Professional Puppetry Arts, which sadly doesn't exist anymore, but it was being head up by Bart Rockerburton, who is now the head of the UConn Department of Puppetry, or I don't know if you'd call it department, the puppetry program at UConn. Yeah. So I went, I should follow up on this. And I did. I just took the dare and I went, I got to learn more about puppetry. And I went up to IPA. And that's where I started making connections, because Bart went to UConn. There were a bunch of other puppet people who he knew who were professionals. One of them being Richard Termini, who was working at the Muppet workshop. And Richard came and guest taught a Muppet style puppet workshop at IPA. And Bart arranged with Richard for me to go tour the Muppet workshop, because Bart knew, I mean, obviously I hauled in my bunch of Muppety kind of style puppets that I'd been making, and went, this guy is interested in the Muppets. Let's see if we can give him an opportunity to get more exposure to it. And Richard kindly arranged for me to visit the Sesame Street studio. And, no, I didn't go to the Sesame Street studio at that time. He arranged for me to get to the workshop, because Sesame Street was, they had just finished their season. So I went and visited the Muppet workshop for the first time in the late spring of 1986. And it was there that they had just finished the Sesame season. They were all kind of burnt out and giddy. Back then, they used to do 130 episodes, hour-long episodes a season.
Wow. And the majority of the episodes were either street segment or Muppety
Or
segment.
Muppet inserts, yeah. And they don't do Muppet inserts anymore. Now that they're half-hour format, it's all like street stuff. Almost no Muppet inserts, no big production numbers with Muppets anymore. But anyway, so back in the day, it was a 365 days a year job. The people who worked in the Muppet workshop for Sesame worked all year round. And they had just finished the season, so all the puppets had come back from the studio, waiting to be repaired and refurbed and cleaned and all that sort of stuff. So there were puppets lying all over the place. Everybody was tired and burnt out and frankly, a little bit giddy. And I went and toured, and they were very kind to me because they knew I was somebody who studied puppetry. I wasn't just a fan. I was a puppeteer. And Carolee Wilcox, who just passed not so long ago, God bless her, said, well, why don't you try on a puppet? And she handed me Grover. And so that's the first time I ever had a Muppet on my hand. And for whatever reason, because it was the style of puppet that I've been imitating, in my own work for so long, for whatever reason, she thought I was okay. And she said, you should contact somebody. You should talk to Jim's personal assistant and see if you can get an audition. And that's what I did. And long story short, I ended up in an audition and started booking gigs with them less than a year after that tour of the workshop.
Nice. And then
so that picture you just showed of Jim was Charleville-Mézières. It was the workshop that Jim taught in Charleville. When I found out he was going to do it, I applied, and because again, I was like, I got sort of thrust into working with him, and I didn't have much in terms of like background working. The first time I ever had a puppet on camera was the workshop I did for Jim, and because everything that I'd done was live puppet shows before then. And anyway, so I kind of felt a little bit unprepared for the work that I was doing with Jim. And I saw that he was teaching this thing. Was like, dude, you're going to actually sit and teach. I want to be there. I want to learn from you instead of just work with you. I want to learn from you. And he came to me, I forgot what we were doing. We were doing like a home video or public service announcements or something. And he said, I see that you sent in an application for the workshop in France. You're already working for me, and I don't know that you'd get anything out of it. And I was devastated because I was like, oh, well, I can't go. Well, that sucks. And that was like a couple months before it happened. And 2 weeks before the workshop, Jim's personal secretary called me up and said, Jim wanted to know if you still thought you were interested in going to Charlottesville because he thought it would be nice to have somebody he knew there. So I ended up going to Charlottesville, and that's what that picture is from. Nice. And it was one of the best experiences of my whole lifetime. I got to listen to Jim's theories instead of just, being in the room with him and doing it. I got to hear why he did what he did. I got to hear all about his background in terms of where he came from and what his approach was. Instead of just doing it, I heard why. And so that time and he was incredibly accessible. Oh my God, he was with the students from morning until midnight. We'd come in, we'd practice, we'd build Muppets, and in the evening, and then he'd go eat lunch with us. And then in the evening, we would watch his work, and then we'd all sit around and critique it, and we'd talk about it. And that was also incredibly valuable time, not just for us, but for Jim. One of the things he admitted to us at the end of the thing was, I haven't sat and watched a retrospective of my work like ever. I don't tend to revisit the stuff that I've done. That's history. I'm thinking about the next thing. Yeah. But to sit and look and trace the chronology of my work has been a really meaningful process for me. So that was cool. That was that experience of having Jim as a teacher was amazing. I mean, he was with us and accessible to us all day, every day. It was a remarkable time. And then, of course, I got to work with him for the next couple of years before, sadly, he passed.
Mm-hmm. And like the things that you did, obviously you were on Sesame, but you did like the Muppet Disney special, like the special, and then the Muppet Vision 3D, right? You were on that one too?
Yeah, I was one of the very few people who got to work on Muppet Vision 3D. It happened during the Sesame Street season. So there was a bunch of people like Kevin Clash couldn't go because he was freaking Elmo. He couldn't leave. He was much too important to Sesame Street. And Jim kind of felt that Jerry was too important to Sesame Street, so he didn't get to go. But it was, Richard Hunt and Steve Whitmire and Dave Goles and Frank Oz, who came in to work on that project, and of course Jim. And then the other two sort of principal puppeteers were Ricky Boyd and me. And then all the people for the crowd scenes and stuff were LA locals. We shot it at the Disney Studios in LA. And that was another one of those projects that I was just like, I was so lucky to work on that. Normally I would also have been working on Sesame Street, but because I was just a utility, a background puppeteer, nobody important to Sesame Street, no signature character, I was expendable for the Sesame season. So I got to go work on it. And, people like Kevin were really jealous because he wanted to work on it too, because it was a big project. And, anytime Frank is there, you want to get a chance to work with Frank too. So, but yeah, that was a great project. And Jim was like a pig in poop on that project. It was so exciting. It had all these technical challenges and stuff. And Jim loved that stuff. The more challenging a project was, the more his enthusiasm was engaged. Something that was really too easy for him, you didn't get his interest the same way. The 3D Muppet thing was also, of course, our first, the first of what was supposed to be many collaborations with the Walt Disney Company. And of course, that all sort of fell apart. And, Muppets didn't get bought by Disney outright until much later. But so that was an exciting, that was the exciting first foray into the Disney Henson relationship. By the time we did Muppets at Walt Disney World, the honeymoon was over, and everybody was kind of these Muppets are in our way, because we shot that at Walt Disney World, and we interrupted their traffic flow because we were shooting on location, and the parks people were kind of mad that we were in their way. Hey, I got this attraction letting out in 20 minutes. You can't interrupt our traffic flow. But so that was a very different sort of experience.
And I got to say, it's funny because I go back and I'll watch that special. I've showed it to my son several times, and I'm actually going to Disney in a few months too. But watching that the Muppets at Walt Disney World special, it's funny because you see especially in that Indiana Jones scene that they're doing at the end, and it'll be the Electric Mayhem is sitting there in a group, and then there's the whole audience, and the people in the audience don't know if they're looking at the Muppets, but you see their eyes looking underneath there too. If you watch the background, it's hilarious.
Well, when you're shooting on location with puppets, it's rough, especially in something that's public. You can't hire thousands of extras,
Say, look straight ahead
for something like that. Yeah. I mean, you can only coach them so much. And it was also very kamikaze. I mean, we had to shoot everything incredibly quickly because again, we couldn't interrupt the flow of the theme park, that's of paramount importance. People didn't come to Walt Disney World to see the Muppets shoot a TV show. They came to go on the rides, So, but that was a really fun special to shoot for a lot of reasons. It's always fun to be at Walt Disney World. It is, it's a magic place. Let's face it. And even if you're working, we still got to go on the rides during lunch breaks and stuff like that. But it was also in many ways, even more so than the 3D Muppet movie, it was a real reunion of sorts because it was all the first string performers. It was all of them. And it wasn't just the performers. The music was supervised by Ray Charles, who had done the music for the Muppet Show. The lighting director, John Rook, the lighting director from the Muppet Show, was there. The director of most of the episodes in the Muppet Show was there. It was in large part a very big family reunion, and that was one of the things about Jim. Family and loyalty to people that he enjoyed working with was important to him. So it was problematic, but it was an awful lot of fun to work on too.
And also Charles Grodin, who just passed away too. He was part of that. So I mean, and again, like you said, loyalty. He had done Muppet Caper with.
He loved the Muppets, man. He was, Charles Grodin was sort of a professional fuss budget. And that was very much a persona. That's not who he really was, as hard as that is to believe. He was delightful to work with, and he really genuinely wanted to be there. He loved the Muppets. He loved working with them, and he had a great amount of respect for Jim. So he was great. It was great to have him there.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously nobody knew at that point in time what was going to happen. I think the special aired like about a week or so before Jim had passed, and who knew?
Yeah, I think it aired like May 6th or something. It was like crazy.
And I mean, fittingly enough, he sang Rainbow Connection in that. So I mean, like you said, it was a reunion of sorts of all these different people coming together. He sang Rainbow Connection. Like who knew? And what a loss it was. Losing Jim.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, certainly, like you were talking about, he never went back and looked at his work. His past work. He's always thinking towards the future. I mean, even though the Muppets, they come and go nowadays, but I think if he saw some of the things that have come since he had passed, look at Dark Crystal, for instance, like how huge. Even Labyrinth, they're always talking about doing more Labyrinth stuff, but these two movies, which didn't do so well back then, like they have such a cult following. They did a series for Netflix. Like, my God, he would be like, I'm sure, thrilled to see like, yeah, these did mean something to people. 100%.
Well, it's interesting because yes, they've grown, you say cult followings. Yes, they've continued to get more popular. What's so interesting and what's fascinating to me about one of the things about Dark Crystal particularly is people forget we're so inundated with monsters and creatures and aliens and stuff nowadays. People forget. I mean, nobody had done anything like Dark Crystal ever before.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a feature-length film with no humans in it. All live-action puppets. Nobody had ever done that before. And the impact of having done that continues to be felt today. I mean, that's one of the things, if you look at Jim's body of work, and if you look at the history of creatures and creature effects in movies and stuff like that, what's really, really interesting to me is the way Jim popularized and sort of put a friendly face on the idea of what a monster is. Mm-hmm. You look at monsters before Jim and before the Muppet monsters. I mean, look at King Kong and look at Frankenstein and Werewolf. Monsters are always bad guys. Monsters are demonic and they're evil and they're to be feared and stuff like that. The monsters on Sesame Street were little kids, preschool friends. And I'm really hard pressed to think of anybody who had that kind of presence in their work, monsters and stuff before Jim that made them work that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of anybody. Monsters were always bad guys. And Jim's work was so bizarre and so abstract, and, calling the monsters and everything sort of put creatures in a whole different place. I can't think. There's so many things like Men in Black would never have happened if Jim's work hadn't come before. A whole movie full of creatures who you root for and stuff. I mean, that just didn't happen before Jim.
Yeah.
And I'm probably exaggerating it, but he certainly had an enormous impact culturally that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do want to get to a couple of these questions here, because I want to. Gosh, you mentioned Men in Black. Like your career has been huge. Men in Black, the Ninja Turtles movies 2 and 3. I mean, like my gosh. But I do want to hit some of these questions here. So I'm just going to go back for a second, and we can come back to all that. So we have. Let me just go back up here. So you've done a lot of things. Like someone wants to know about the puppets for the Daily Show, like Leslie Smokin' Hot. They want you to talk a little bit about that.
Oh my gosh, that you saw that? There's more than 5 people who saw that. and it's somebody actually asking a question. That was fun. That was a weird little fringy project. Somebody had that was a Avenue Q concurrent project. Somebody had seen Avenue Q and was getting excited about puppets, and they wanted to do puppets on a for a daily newsfeed thing, and it was early in that kind of streaming content. If we had done it now, probably we'd stand a better chance at getting wider distribution, but it was a little too nichey at the time, because that was like 16, 17 years ago. But it was fun because we were, again, it was guerrilla puppetry. We'd gather the news stories of the day. What were people talking about? What were people buzzing about? And then we went out literally into Times Square. We went around the streets of New York and just asked people dumb questions about dumb news stories. And we were just making it up, that was a fun project. Unfortunately, the Daily was affiliated with its parent company. If you went through the layers of corporate stuff, its parent company was Fox, which really put a tight clamp on the kind of material that we could do because it was very right-leaning. So there was always a political place that we couldn't go. So that was unfortunate because that was sort of in a way that sort of censored what we could do. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, and again, that show wouldn't have been possible if it hadn't been for Jim's work, because you could not have interviewed people with a puppet on the street unless they were familiar with the kind of puppets that Jim did. Unless the popularity of the Muppets was so huge, nobody'd want to be interviewed by a puppet on the street. But but it was fun. That was a fun. And we were lying on the ground. We were sitting on dirty boxes that we pulled out of dumpsters to get the shot or whatever. I mean, it was a crazy shoot. But so thank you for having noticed that it existed. It was fun.
And now we have a question here from Adam Panzer. And this is a good question because I guess, moving on from what Jim has done, and I guess a little bit of what you did with Men in Black, definitely Ninja Turtles, and even just seeing the tech, like with the Waldo and the technology that goes with that. Adam Panzer wants to know: do you feel that Cgfx have had a negative effect on the puppeteer industry? Has CG eliminated the need for creative storytelling in that regard?
That's a yes and no answer. The embrace of CG a few years ago virtually killed all live action puppetry opportunities. And what has happened over time is that creative people have realized the limitations of CGI, because it does have limitations. The stuff isn't really there. Yeah. And especially if you're talking about creatures and characters, you can tell. You can tell that they're not there. They're not reflected in the other actor's eyes. Like if somebody's having a conversation with Donatello in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, you can see him reflected in their eyes. He's there. Mm-hmm. He's real. He's tangible. It's something that somebody can talk to. In the CGI Turtles movies, those actors are talking to tennis balls on a stick.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Puppets are real. Puppets are a tangible physical object, and CGI cannot replace a lot of those real, tangible physical objects. And also, the thing about CGI is, in large part, let's take a performance of, let's keep on the Turtles example. Yes, now they have a guy in a motion cap suit, and he can be live on set. But none of it's rendered. He still has all these weird little dots on him and all that sort of stuff. So that performance, ultimately, what ends up on camera is dependent on enormous number of people. There's some guy who's doing the digital lighting. There's a different guy who does surface textures. There's a different guy who does movement. There's another guy who does the rotoscope. There's another guy who, it's this huge, vast number of people to make one thing happen. When you're doing something real time with Kermit on camera, there's one person who's doing the performance. Yeah. So it's not filtered. It's not diluted. A physical, tangible performance, when it's done well, is always going to be more effective than one that has 53,000 different people working on it. That's my opinion. So yes, a lot of puppetry jobs were lost to CGI, but now people have gotten wind of how many limitations there are to CGI. So there's now actually a lot more live action stuff happening that is being enhanced by CGI. Instead of being solely CGI, it is a combination of things. For example, let's take what was that? The water creature thing. The one the one that Doug Jones performed.
Abe Sapien, or no?
No. The real recent one, the one that won.
I know the name of the movie. I can't think of it. It's like on the tip of my tongue, but I know which one you're talking about.
It's like the Shape of Water.
Shape of Water.
Now, it's mostly a suit performance by Doug Jones. Mostly, but it has CGI enhancement on it, like he has iridescent color things underwater that are all CGI, and he has certain facial functions that are enhanced with CGI and stuff like that. So people are learning to incorporate CGI with real, live action stuff. So actually, there are a lot more live action puppeteering and stuff jobs happening now than there were a few years ago. The pendulum has swung. The first Men in Black had all kinds of live action stuff. It was all real, almost no CGI. Then they were like, well, why are we spending all this time on physical effects? We'll just get those guys in LA to pop up stuff on the computer. And then all the characters started becoming CGI, and they were like, well, you know what? It's not quite as effective. So then, it swung further the other way, and live action stuff started coming back in. So yeah, there was a period of time when it absolutely killed almost all puppetry, and now there's a lot more of it. Look at all the puppet stuff that's going on right now. There are actually a lot of puppet projects. You've got Fraggle Rock. People are nostalgic for live action puppetry. People miss it. They miss the immediacy of it. And so there's more of it now.
Yeah, and Chris Petstone just wrote here, Baby Yoda seemed to be a great great for executive PR.
Oh yeah. Baby Yoda, man. Baby Yoda green-lighted a whole lot of puppet projects because he is the most popular puppet since Yoda, And what's the most interesting story about that is it wasn't intended to be a live puppet. The live puppet was supposed to be just a placekeeper for CGI that was supposed to replace it. And the one of the guest stars, what's his name? The guy who's also a director.
Jon Favreau. Oh no, the guy did Thor. No.
The European guy. I'm failing. He's a famous director who had a live action cameo as an actor. He got wind that they were going to CGI it all later, and he said, "Don't you dare. Don't you dare. This is so effective. This is so good." He kind of shamed him into it. And they ended up leaving
Werner Herzog. Werner Herzog.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Chris Patstone. Yes, Werner Herzog shamed him into it. He said, you should be brave enough to leave this as a puppet because it's so effective as it is. Don't throw this CGI crap at it. Leave it as a puppet. And he won the day. And best decision they ever made, having that stupid puppet. But see, that's something that was very exciting about the Star Wars reboots. They used a lot of live action stuff. So it harkened back to the old ones. I mean, George Lucas really got lost on the CGI thing. He just got techno happy and it was like, let's CGI everything. Yeah. I can change the color of the walls at will. Yeah, whoopee. That doesn't help you tell the story. And it doesn't help the actors. I mean, that's one of the things about those prequels. You can't fault the actors so much. They had nothing to work with. First, they had terrible dialogue.
Blue screen, that's it.
And how do you act to that? If the thing is there, if you're talking to Maz, that's easier than pretending you are. So when Abrams got all that live action stuff started, that was also a great rebirth of interest in that. If they hadn't done all those Star Wars live action stuff, you never would have seen the reboot of the Dark Crystal stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned, and it's a really good point. I've had this conversation with people, and and going back to like say Kermit and Piggy, right? Like there's something about that, and a lot of it, back in the day, it was Jim and Frank going on to like the Tonight Show. Like a cartoon like Bugs Bunny can't go on the Tonight Show. Mickey Mouse cannot go on to the Tonight Show. Kermit and Piggy can go on to the Tonight Show, and Johnny Carson or whoever the host is or whatever is going to say something to them. That's going to be because if you do something animated, and they've done and things like that, but that's all pre-recorded, pre-scripted, and what have you. Johnny Carson can throw something at Kermit, and Kermit's going to react. And it may not be kid Kermit, it may be adult Kermit. But you look at all those clips on YouTube, and that's that. With puppetry, like and in regards to like the Muppet characters, and even like we're gonna get to the Avenue Q characters, like they're real, like they have a life of their own outside of their. Here. Those are real.
Well, that's like one of the big differences. Like you go into the Disney parks and you see Mickey Mouse, there as a costume character. That's not the Mickey you see on TV. That's not the Mickey that you see in media. That's not the real Mickey. You see Kermit the Frog. That's the real Kermit the Frog, dude. There is, it's the real puppet. It's a tangible thing, So when you have, it's just a different level of reality. It's funny to say that puppets are real because, of course, they're not. But that puppets are real. They're a three-dimensional thing that happens in real time.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, gosh, we're getting all kinds of questions. But I want, and are you good for a little bit more?
Sure, of course.
All right, cool.
It's hard to shut me up. We could go, till tomorrow morning.
Well, because we have some questions about Book of Pooh, Jerry Nelson. Oh my, like there's so much, and I mean we have to talk about Avenue Q. So I'll just quickly ask a question. And I actually pulled up a picture from Book of Pooh. They want to know, do you have any stories about Book of Pooh?
Book of Pooh was a very innovative show. It was one of the first projects ever that had a real-time digitally rendered background that could adjust depending on the camera angle. That was cool and an innovative technology that also created a lot of challenges. It was very difficult. One of the things about puppets is there's a lot of ways they can't be used. They, like anything else, and any performance medium has its limitations. When you're working, like all the Book of Pooh puppets were full body. They were seen from head to toe, right? And they were done in a style that we tend to think of as a derivative of bunraku puppetry. There's three people, at least three people, that are required to make one puppet work. You got, probably one guy in the head and the body, another guy on the hands, and another guy in the feet. Sometimes it's two people on the hands if you need to do a specific thing. And that's cool, and you can do a lot of stuff with it, except turn around. You can't go dead profile because the rods cross. You'd get a big, Ultimate, you get a big chroma key tear through the thing, and you can't show the back of the puppet because that's where all the controls are. So it has its limitations. It was a very ambitious show. It was a very expensive show. And again, it suffered from the fact that the performances weren't really live. They were working to pre-recorded tracks. To a large degree. There was some flexibility, and when the puppeteers found that they just needed more time to accomplish the thing, like when people are pre-recording, they don't think how long it's going to take Tigger to pick up that cup if he's a puppet. It might take more than, okay, I'll pick up this cup. You know, it might take longer than that. So if things had to happen that weren't allowed time for in the pre-recorded track, the puppeteers would speak the things just as a reference track, and then they'd go in and they'd dub them in later with the voice actors. But so that was problematic because the puppeteers weren't doing the voices live. There was a certain lack of spontaneity. So it was a difficult show. And like I said, there are limitations to that style of puppetry. When you have more than a couple of characters on screen at the same time, where do you fit all the puppeteers? We had these unbelievable pretzel-shaped contortions that we had to go through to try to fit next to each other, just if Pooh was standing close to Tigger and Piglet. You know, it was a difficult show. But of course, like, again, it was a challenge, and challenges are fun. It's a shame that it didn't have a greater future, and that didn't have more time to work out some of the problems and improve on, those things.
Gotcha. Anthony Thompson's asked, is there a reason why it was decided to have an actor dub over Bluebird instead of having you voice him yourself?
Let me explain this reference. There was in season 20, right? Or was it 21? I think it was 20, Sesame season 20. They wanted to do a superhero character for Big Bird. It was tied into the idea of imagination. What was Big Bird's imagination? They were trying to, encourage kids to use their imagination. They've already established that Big Bird draws. And so the idea was that Big Bird had created this superhero character who was a bird, and it was Bluebird. So they took pieces of the Bluebird that was used in the Sesame Street Big Bird movie, Follow That Bird, his body parts, and they built a new head and new feet, and made him a superhero. And that was a character that I played. And there was kind of a tandem decision. They decided that the voice that I was doing live, and it's not really true, but they decided that it sounded too much like Carol, and they thought it was confusing, and that kids might think it was Carol, and they didn't want it to sound like. And they were under pressure at the time, and rightly so. They were under pressure to have more African American characters and flavor to the show, and so they hired an African American guy to do the voiceover for me.
Gotcha. So it was, and that's stuff like that happens all the time.
But he didn't pre-record it. I performed everything live, and they dubbed it afterward.
All right, so I want to get into Avenue Q. I mean, and again, you have such a wealth of things. Because we had some questions here. Avenue Q, I know most people probably know the story. How did you get involved with that?
Okay. Again, do you have until 4:00 tomorrow morning? No, I'll try to make this as short as possible. So, Laura McLean, who's a wrangler on Sesame Street, longtime associate of mine, was in contact with Jeff Marks, who I did not know at the time, who had been an intern at the music department of Sesame Street, but had been fired for too aggressively pitching his own songs. They were like, go make copies and distribute them to the musicians. Yeah, but look, I can write songs. Look, go make copies. No, but I can write songs. You're fired. So anyway, Jeff contacted Laura. Jeff and Bobby Lopez, Jeff Marks and Bobby Lopez, who are eventually to write create Avenue Q, were working together at the BMI Musical Theater Workshop, which is a workshop for aspiring musical theater students, or writers. And they were collaborating on a project. It was a Muppet script. At BMI Musical Workshop, you write music for all kinds of projects that you don't have the intellectual property rights to. It's an academic search situation. So, class assignments are like, write a torch song for Blanche Dubois, or write a charm song for Willie Loman, or whatever. It's academic. You're writing songs for things you don't have the rights to. And Bobby and Jeff had been paired together and were writing a spec Muppet musical called Kermit, Prince of Denmark. Mm-hmm. And they had been workshopping the songs already in class, and they'd been well received in class. And Jeff and Bobby went, we're writing these songs for puppet characters. Wouldn't it be cool to have in class a puppet sing it? So Jeff contacted Laura and said, hey, do you know anybody who can do like a Kermit impersonation or whatever and can come into our class? And she contacted me and said, hey, do you want to talk to Jeff and Bobby about this Kermit thing? That's my impersonation of Laura McLean. And one of the things that I've always predicated my career on is you just never say no. Mm-hmm. Unless you have a really compelling reason to, or you get enough information to make you want to say no. But without getting more information, just don't say no out of hand. So I was like, well, I don't know Jeff and Bobby. I don't even know what the BMI Musical Theater Workshop is. Sure, I'll meet him. I'll talk to him. I'll take my little knockoff Kermit puppet, and we'll see if it's a good match. And so I went to see, Jeff's apartment, and Bobby and Jeff were there, and they played the song that they'd written for Kermit for me, that they wanted somebody to perform in class. And three things immediately impressed me about the song. One, it was a great song. It was a really good song. A lot of aspiring musical theater writers think they have to reinvent Sondheim, and everything that they write has to be, innovative and Sturm und Drang, and it's got to be all this, it's got to be really complicated. It's got to be, in 9/13 time, and all this sort of stuff. But what Jeff and Bobby had written was a really nice sort of Tin Pan Alley American songbook kind of style song that was good musically, funny. There were funny lyrics. It was a good idea. And the third thing that immediately impressed about the song, it was a good song for Kermit. They really had a good handle on who they were writing the song for. Mm. It really sounded like a Kermit the Frog song. So I was like, okay, sure, I'll do it in class for you guys. And we practiced it a couple times. We went to class. They were like, okay, now what are we going to hide you behind the piano, or how are we going to do this thing? And I was like, dudes, I've been doing this for a long time. I used to do Kermit songs when I was in college. Friends of mine would do coffee houses, and I'd sit on a stool and I'd sing the song Rainbow Connection with a frog puppet, and nobody ever noticed I was there. They were just so enthralled by seeing a live puppet that it didn't matter how it was being performed. I said, I'll just sit on a stool and I'll perform the frog and no one will know I'm there. And that's exactly what happened. I sang the song and the class went crazy. They'd never seen anything like it before. And the theatrical convention of having the puppeteer visible while the puppet was singing was totally acceptable. And so they went on and developed more songs. I did more things in class for them. I built other, prototype knockoff characters and stuff like that. And we ended up developing it into a full-length piece. We pitched it to the Henson Company. They said, we're not interested. We don't do musicals anymore. I was like, okay, whatever. That's from Brian Henson. And so Bobby and Jeff went, well, heck, screw this. Why are we writing for somebody else's characters that we don't own? They can just turn us down and that's the end of it. We'll do our own puppet thing. And that's when Avenue Q was born. That was that was the $1 million idea. It was Avenue Q was what if of Avenue Q is, what if Sesame Street had to grow up? What if the puppet characters didn't teach you ABCs and 1, 2, 3s? What if the puppet characters were there to teach you about dating and identity and racism? So what if the lessons had to grow up? What if the puppets had to grow up? And that was the $1 million idea. And that's where Avenue Q was born.
You know, and I mean when that show came out too, like it was so different than what was normally on Broadway too. A lot of people were unsure how to take it, and it kind of took Broadway by storm.
Oh yeah. Well, and to this day, I mean, it was the first, and it's so far it's the only Broadway musical that absolutely stars the puppets. Now, a lot of people try to call me up short on that and say, "Well, The Lion King," but you're wrong. Lion King does not star puppets. The puppets are all supporting characters and scenic effects and stuff. They're all wildebeests and ladies with grass on their heads and stuff like that. The main characters are all actors in masks, or not even masks, their little headgear, you know. So Avenue Q was the first musical where the puppets were actually the stars. And it's also what made it innovative, of course, was it was the style of puppet that Jim codified for TV that's been so strongly associated with TV.
Yeah.
Those style of puppets live theater. And we took the, if you'll forgive the sort of academic reference, we took that sort of Brechtian Verfremdungseffekt theatricality of having a live puppeteer on stage with a puppet, the exposed theatricality of it, and we just went with it. Because I knew from years and years of experience that you bring a puppet on stage, even if the puppeteer is visible, the audience doesn't care. If it's a good performance, the audience will absolutely 100% accept that the puppet is the sentient being. It's like watching a foreign movie with subtitles. You might be very aware of it at first. You're going to go and you're going to read, and your focus will be split. But after the first couple of seconds, you can take it all in. Your brain accepts that convention, and you don't even have to think about it anymore. It's the same with Avenue Q. And it's one of the reasons we started the show the way we did. We started with one puppet and puppeteer coming out on stage. We didn't try to overwhelm the audience with a big opening number with lots of puppets and lots of people. We wanted to introduce them to that idea slowly and get them used to the fact that there were two things that came into tandem to create one character. So that's why it starts with BA in English. What do you do with a BA in English? Princeton comes out, and the Princeton puppeteer comes out, and that's how you're introduced to the idea. So the audience has a moment to accept that convention. And it only works on stage. If we were ever to make an Avenue Q movie, it would have to be done Muppet style. The characters would have to be fully puppets, because in a theater, the audience gets to choose what it looks at.
Yeah.
Okay, you've got 800 or 1,000 or however many eyes there are, and you've got all these different points of view. The point of view in a movie or a TV show is picked for you. So it's a different kind of experience.
I have to say, you mentioned about what your eyes would gravitate to. And again, I'm a Puppetry fan. Like one of my favorite things, like, I'll watch it over and over again. In the It Sucks to Be Me song. Like when you come out with Nicky and Jen Barnhart next to you, like that one part where you do ironing your underwear, just the way both of your hands are like, and everything you guys do, it's like magic.
Well, Jen, you know, I wanted Jen to be my partner because I knew she was good. You know, I knew we would have that going for us, and Jen is very good. And that being a right hand like that is a tough place to be, because you're the second banana, and that's a hard place to be all the time. But their contribution, that right-hander's contribution, is so important. That's what makes the characters alive. And that was one of the things about Avenue Q that I wanted to be part of the experience. I wanted people to see different modes of this kind of television puppet. I wanted them to see rod hand puppets. I wanted them to see that two people are needed to do a live hands puppet. I wanted them to see that Cookie Monster is not one guy, it's two people. I wanted them to see that. So that was baked into it. And it's really no accident that guess whose characters are the live hands puppets? It's me. It's Nicky and it's Trekkie Monster who are the live hand puppets, because I love working that way. I love working in partnership with somebody else. It's so rewarding. It's so fulfilling to have somebody else there. You got to use my TV monitor. Hi. How are you doing?
How are you doing tonight? Welcome.
I have an empty hand, which is sad.
Oh no.
But anyway, so I really love that cooperation. I love that collaboration. It is, our nicknames were we were the Fred and Ginger of Avenue Q. It really is like the relationship that two dancers have. It's a dance. The person who's doing your right hand is your dance partner. You have to be that in tune, and you have to be that simpatico with each other. And it's a different task as the performer than if you're doing Princeton or Kate. Princeton or Kate, who are independent, one performer puppets, they can change things. Yeah. They can make different choices whenever they want to, because it doesn't impact, they don't have a partner. You, as the performer of Nicky or the performer of Trekkie Monster, your performance has to be so consistent because you cannot surprise your partner. You can't just ad lib a gesture out of nowhere, because then you'll catch the other person off guard and you won't be in sync, and the puppet will be less believable because you'll have done something that denies the reality of the other person. Yeah, complicated answer. So anyway, so it's I love working that way, and it's why Trekkie and Nicky are the live hands puppets. It also was an intentional choice for Princeton and Kate to be independent performers, because Princeton and Kate are Nicky and Trekkie Monster are supporting roles. Yeah. Princeton and Kate are the romantic leads, and it would be really weird to have all their love scenes and romantic scenes with 4 people there on stage. Yeah. So it only makes sense for them to be rod hands puppets.
And I like that analogy about the Fred and Ginger of it, because when working on a show like Sesame Street or the Muppets, or you're working on that TV monitor, the two of you were going all over the stage, and you were leading it, so she had to be right there with you, so.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's why you have to plan everything so much when you're doing that kind of character for theater. One, because you just want to be coordinated with each other, and you don't get a second chance. you don't go, okay, let's do another take. You gotta nail it every night. You gotta do it the same way. And I want to emphasize, that's the thing about Jen. She's so good. She intuited very quickly the way I was going to do things, and made it look effortless, which is hard to do. And everybody works differently. If you're right-handing for Frank Oz, Frank is very spontaneous, and he makes strong choices, and he never makes the same one twice. Every take's different. So you're hanging on for dear life, unless there's a specific thing where I'm going to pick up the bottle now that you plan out. If he's just it's very free form. Other performers like Dave Goelz is much more planned. He is much more specific about stuff. It's all sort of choreographed in advance. He makes choices about, okay, when I say this thing with Bunsen, let's put our fingertips together. Let's do this fussy little gesture. We'll do that. And so he'll work with you. And so it becomes very much more choreographed than what Frank does. So Dave is a lot of fun to work with for a different reason, because it's so fun to be able to nail that choreography. One of my favorite gestures ever is when I was working with Dave, I was his right hand for part of the time in Bunsen for the Muppet 3D movie. Mm-hmm. And the first scene where Bunsen and Beaker come out, Bunsen is talking about, all the technologies that they're innovating on this 3D technology and stuff. And the wheels of progress will turn. And we did this stupid little gear thing. That's one of my favorite things ever that I ever did with anybody. I love that we got to do that, But so everybody's different, and the challenge of being a right-handed puppeteer can hardly be, understated. It's a tough job.
Mm-hmm. And I want to wrap up, since that we went a little bit over tonight. But I want to ask, because you mentioned it. Obviously, I guess, but Avenue Q, they do touring things now, and it goes out to school. There's school versions of it. Has there been talk of it coming back to Broadway or off Broadway? I know Little Shop came back to off Broadway, stuff like that. And then even you mentioned a film. I remember a while ago they said something that there was a possibility they were pitching a TV series.
Well, that's how it was originally envisioned. It was originally a television story. That's how we pitched the show to begin with. It was originally conceived as a TV show, and we did a public reading of it that was by necessity, more or less a theatrical presentation. And there were producers there who came to us afterward and said, "Have you ever thought about making this a piece of theater?" And when the lead producers on Rent say, "Have you ever thought about making this a piece of theater?" you go, "Yes." So that's how Avenue Q became a piece of theater. It was originally conceived as a television show. It probably will never be a TV show. A TV show requires so many, a vast army of writers, to sustain it. Jeff and Bobby would have to approve every song that other people wrote and everything. And that's just not going to happen. We came this close to shooting a la Hamilton, a live performance of the show for Netflix, and it at the very last minute the plug got pulled, and which is just a shame, because it would have been really great to have that original cast, recorded for prosperity, as they say. That won't happen. There might, we were all very sad when the show closed, but as Bobby Lopez, co-creator of the show, said, well, if it doesn't close, it can never be revived. So, maybe someday it'll be revived. I mean, things get revived so fast now. And Avenue Q is almost 20 years old now.
Yeah, you just had the end.
It could, and there's been talk of they're supposed to send out another non-union tour of the musical, national tour of the show. It hasn't been formally announced yet, but it was announced before the whole pandemic thing, and of course that got trashed. But maybe that'll get back up on its feet. It would be nice to think that Avenue Q has some kind of a future.
Yeah. I mean, and you see like films like, like we mentioned the Hamilton thing, but like In the Heights is coming out this summer. There's other Broadway shows that are be turning into films. So, I mean, a
feature film of it wouldn't be impossible. I mean, and not like, and of course, they did this recorded theatrical performance of Hamilton, and they're still going to make a feature film of it that is not filmed in a theater. That expands it. It would be, that's my dream thing, like that eventually we get to make a Muppet style feature film of it. I think it would be really cool. And it's a kind of humor that people enjoy. People enjoy adult humor from puppets. Yes. They're so used to puppets being for children that it's still surprising. It is still, a nice variation on a theme when you get to do puppets for adult audiences. I mean, that was one of the things that I'm very proud of about Avenue Q. We took puppets that people are used to seeing on TV for kids, and we did it for adults, and not in a vulgar way. There's nothing explicit about it. It is adult humor, but it's not lowest common denominator adult humor. That was the failing with the Henson Project. That they did all the cheap, vulgar puppet jokes that they could think of. They squashed them in there, and it didn't work because in my opinion, it really didn't respect its audience. It just played into every expectation of what a dirty puppet show would be, and that's one of the things we never wanted to do with Avenue Q. We never wanted to disrespect the art form. We never disrespected the puppets. We never made cheap jokes like, "Oh, Nicky, come here." "Oh, I would, except I got a hand up my ass." We never did that. There's no disrespect for the puppets. We don't make fun of puppetry. That was one of the things that Henson was very afraid of. They were very scared of Avenue Q. They hated the fact that, they thought people were going to make fun of puppetry. And of course, that's exactly not what it was. And everybody who worked with Jim, who came to see the show, Frank Oz and Dave Goelz and Jerry Nelson, every one of them, it's a point of pride with me. Every one of them who came to the show totally got it and said, "You know what? Jim would have loved this show." because Jim always wanted to do a Broadway show. He always wanted to do a Broadway show, but he never quite took that leap of faith. He was afraid to put visible puppeteers on stage. The idea scared him. He didn't trust that the theatrical audience would accept that convention. And it's too bad, because a live Muppet show, I mean, that's basically, that's what Avenue Q became for people. It was a live Muppet show, And they should still do that. They should still do. They workshopped one like 8 years ago, and it never went anywhere. They should still do the Muppets live on Broadway.
They did the
still do it. They did those live, live at the O2 and live at the Hollywood Bowl things, and they were very well received. And why that never went a step further, I don't know. Well, I do know. It's because Disney doesn't respect the property enough. Disney can spend $100 million on a Star Wars movie and make $1 billion. If they spend $3 million an episode on The Mandalorian, they'll get it back. If you spend $50,000 in a Muppet project, you might only make $200,000. So they don't get enough return on their investment, and they're not their own indigenous characters. They're just not interested. Marvel, Star Wars, okay, we know that's easy money. We're going to make our money back. We're just going to throw that stuff out there, and no matter what, we'll make our money back. But they don't know what to do with the Muppets. It's too bad. The Muppets were acquired. The acquisition of the Muppets was motivated by a CEO who was no longer there. Michael Eisner wanted that to happen. It was never a deal that Iger was very interested in. And now that he's exiting, the new CEO guy, he doesn't really care about the Muppets either. So it's a shame. But Muppets should be on Broadway, and Avenue Q proved that it could be. That's one of the other things I'm very proud about Avenue Q. Avenue Q is totally and wholly responsible for all the live Muppet things you have seen, because we proved that people didn't care if they could see the Puppeteers. That was something they were always scared to do, always. Yeah. And once Avenue Q started doing it, well, suddenly the Sesame Street Puppeteers were making appearances live and things. And suddenly the Muppets were doing live shows. Thank you, Avenue Q. That made it possible.
Yeah. Nice. Well, Rick, this has been great tonight. And there's still so much more. I want to have you and Noel and Jim Martin to come on and talk about Ninja Turtles, because I know there's, and talking with Noel a while ago, and even Jim, you guys have a bunch of stories from Ninja Turtles 3, which I think would be awesome to talk about. At some point.
Those animatronic movies, those animatronic characters were so cool. The technology that started being developed during Dark Crystal and advanced through to the Ninja Turtles movies, it's amazing. It's great. Again, talk about, working as somebody with your dance partner, the guy in the suit who's wearing the head that you're manipulating, who's got to follow your dialogue and you have to follow his. Wow. Talk about having a dance partner. That was one of the coolest things about doing it. Yeah, see, there's one of the controllers. That's from Ninja Turtles 2, where I was puppeteering Toka. That was my first animatronic gig. Those rigs, look at all those little levers. There are something like 28 potentiometers that you are responsible for with all your fingers. There's one on the big stick that goes this way and back and forth, and all the levers on your fingers go front and back, and you got a thumb pot that's a 4-way pot, and then you're lip syncing with this hand, and that's on a control that goes forward and back, and it twists side to side. It's crazy.
It's all. I mean, you've done it all.
Well, and talk about a fun challenge, man. It was the Ninja Turtles 2 was the first animatronic job I ever had, and so I went into it with no experience, and I had to learn it all. And it was tough, man, but it was a fun challenge. It was awesome. And number 3, was even more of a challenge because I had a bigger role. I was playing one of the main turtles, Donatello, who had a lot of dialogue. And both of those films were very difficult to work on, very hard work, very challenging, but also the reward. I mean, there's still scenes in the Ninja Turtles 3 where I see Donnie say stuff that I ad-libbed because I thought that, well, we'll never use this take. And so I just ad-libbed silly, stupid stuff because I was starting to get, bold. And because by that time, Jim Raposo, the turtle performer who was in Donatello, and I were really, getting along well. And we could do stuff like that. We reacted to each other really quickly. We were right there in each other's head. It's fun to hear, still, when I hear Donnie say, "Help, I'm a turtle and I can't get up." I just ad-libbed that, and it's in the movie. And I love that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. So, but once again, Rick, thank you so much for doing this tonight. I want to definitely have you come on and talk.
Everybody's asleep.
No, we still have a bunch of people watching. So no, this was a lot of fun. I think everybody who tuned in tonight, we had a really nice turnout tonight watching it. If you want to check out more of Rick's work, go to Instagram and Facebook, Rick Lyon Puppets. And then if you want to see like the older things that Rick had done, and again, great photos on there, lionpuppets.com. It's a phenomenal website. So, once again, everybody who watched tonight, thanks for tuning in. I hope we got to a bunch of the questions that you guys wanted to. I know there's probably more, but we can do this again one night. So again, thank you, Rick, so much. If you just want to hold off while I close up, and
Sure.
We will see everybody next week on IncrediChat.
And if people still have questions, burning questions, email me. That's okay. Go to my Facebook page, find the email link, and email me a question. I'll try to, I get a lot of emails, so I might not get to it right away. And don't forget that there are spam filters. So if I don't answer your question, it may be because I didn't get it, not because I'm just not answering you. But feel free. I'm out there. And
just to add on to what you just said, Rick, and I'll tell this to everybody watching. About 20 years ago, season 30 of Sesame Street. I was an intern down at Sesame Street. I was working over at Dragon Tales, and I stumbled upon Lion Puppets, and I was able to get into one of those workshops with Kevin Clash and John Tartaglia. It was in the brownstone up in the room with the Kermit, the Kermit painting. And prior to that, because I had found your website, I shot you an email. I think I still have the email somewhere. You responded to me, and little did I know, 2 or 3 days later at that workshop, there you were. So
there you go.
We will write back. So again, everybody, thanks for watching, and we will see you all next week on IncrediChat. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, Mike.
You bet.